Welcome to Approach Pod, where we dive deep into the minds of elite performers from every walk of life. Today, we're honored to have a very special guest, former Navy SEAL and the man known as the Yip Slayer, Jason Kuhn. Jason's performance company, Stonewall Solutions, has helped some of the world's top athletes, from MLB World Series champions to PGA Tour winners and Division I All-Americans, overcome the blocks that can derail even the best of careers. In today's episode, we'll dive into Jason's personal story, what it was like transitioning from baseball to the Navy SEALs, and how he developed the methods that have made him a sought-after mental performance coach. We'll also explore the science behind the yips, why even the best athletes fall victim to it, and how anyone, whether you're on the field, in the office, or in life, can benefit from mastering their mindset.
What's up, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you. Yeah, not a whole lot. Just back in Houston, Texas for the off season. What's new with you?
Nice. Not too much, man. Well, I'm coaching baseball now, coaching a 9U select team, my sons. So that's been interesting.
Hey, there you go. That's fun. How's that going?
Oh, it's going. We're 2-1. We lost to like the premier team around here, and we've got everything from a couple of the best players their age I've ever seen to a kid who's never played before. So I just took everybody, and yeah, it's been fun. They play real baseball, lead off, drop strike threes, you name it. So it's a mess sometimes, but.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. Yeah, that's great. I bet it's a little different from coaching Tyler up in the big leagues to the change, I would say.
It's fun though, man. I'm having a good time with it.
Yeah, no, I bet. Well, we'll get right into it. So for those of you who are listening, Jason Kuhn and I, we have a relationship that I consider him to be one of the mentors in my life that really kind of reshaped the way I think about baseball. And we'll get into that a lot more in Jason's story, but really just it kind of resonated through my life past the time that we started working together. And I still take a lot of the lessons that we worked on and he taught me with me today. You know, here we are 2 years later, a little over 2 years. I think we're coming up on 3 years since I first called you. But so my story with Jason, and I'll let him have the floor. And, you know, you won't hear too much from me other than just kind of experiences I had from regarding his story and the things that he taught me. Essentially, I was in high school. I was a pretty good pitcher. I was a pretty good third baseman as well. I was, as a sophomore, I was anywhere from 82 to 84 when I was a tall string bean of a kid. And a lot of people saw that I had promise and as a two-way, and I ended up going to commit to my first school in the University of Virginia as a two-way. And a lot of injuries later in the shoulder and a lot of things that have kind of happened that I kind of let social expectations and expectations from coaches kind of redefined what I thought of the game, and it basically sculpted into this, you know, a lot of performance anxiety, a lot of things that, you know, focus on things that I couldn't control, ultimately led to the University of Virginia coaching staff. They didn't pull my scholarship, but they actually called my dad and basically said that, hey, he can still come here, but, you know, it's going to be unlikely that he's going to see the field. So we, you know, navigated through that, and I ended up going to Arizona State, you know, still kind of battling a lot of the things that I had mentioned just previously. Anyways, have a solid year my freshman year, but by this time, we'll talk and let Jason share more of it. But I had developed what people believe to be a mental performance anxiety issue in the yips. And that's what I thought it was at the time. I didn't, you know, really know anything too much about it. I after my injuries, I came back and I felt everything was fine. I didn't have anxiety playing catch, but it ultimately resonated in I couldn't play catch from 10 feet away. And, you know, I'd battled through it on my own for, you know, from my senior year of high school, which was the COVID senior year. And at the time, I thought that I had a good chance to go in that 5-round draft just because, you know, I'd been hitting so well, and every scout that I talked to thought and believed that, okay, the throwing will come, he can hit, and, you know, that's the bottom line. And the problem with that is I knew in my head that it wasn't mechanical, because I knew that I had the physical ability to throw a baseball. It was, at that point, it was deeper than that, and I knew something was wrong. And that ultimately led me to get in communication with a mental performance coach named Brian Kane. And I thought that Brian has taught me an unbelievable amount of stuff when you talk about mentors for myself, and he would definitely be one of them. So I worked with Brian for the next few years. Our coaching staff at Arizona State ends up getting fired after my freshman year. I ended up playing quite a bit. By that time, I was practicing a lot of the things that actually Jason and I had worked on in years to come without even knowing it. But that's when I found some progress there, and I actually was serviceable enough to play the field, and I actually got a good amount of playing time my freshman year. Became the everyday guy around the midway point of the year, and ended up playing, which ended up serving me really well. So our coaching staff ends up getting fired. I go to Texas A&M. I follow our hitting coach there, and that's where Brian Kane has his oldest client in college baseball, which is Coach Jim Schlossnagle. And I worked with Schloss and have a good relationship with him to this day. And ultimately, by this point, somewhere along the line in the fall, I knew that this was going to be an issue, and the Yips had kind of molded their way back into my playing. And it was also difficult because, as Jason will talk about, it's a weird thing, and it doesn't come up in any particular instance. It's weird. It doesn't work how you'd think it would, and that's why the mental side of it is so misdiagnosed. But I end up going to the winter and had a really good fall from the bat side. I actually played solid defense, but I'm playing first base, and so the throwing wasn't too prevalent. And so I get to the winter, and our team is practicing, getting ready for the season. I remember the first day I put all these expectations on the kind of year that I'd have, and this was my sophomore year at this point, and we're about 3 weeks away from opening day, and I just remember I made like 10 errors in our pregame, had no idea where the ball was going. It was cold, couldn't feel my hands, and that may have been part of it. But I remember I go home and I cried and I cried and I cried to God. And similar to how Jason talks in his story, I felt like my prayer was answered in a matter of moments. And I called Brian, I sent him a text, and he sends me this link to a guy named Tyler Matzik, who was a World Series champion with Aggies listening. AJ Mentor was on that pitching staff as well. And he said, "Here, I got a guy, and I want you to call him." And I was like, dude, I've tried freaking everything in the book. I was like, this guy, I mean, by this point I had nothing to lose. And so I called Jason, and he goes, he's a Navy SEAL. He's like, he'll talk to you. Like he helped this guy a lot. Like, see what he can do for you, see how he can help you. And I was like, all right, man, whatever. Like, at this point, I'll try anything. So I ended up calling Jason, and for literally like an hour and a half, we talked. And that moment was for me an instant. People call them God winks. People can call them life preservers, that God will throw you in times of need. But I really do look back at that night and think about, man, that was God kind of being like, hey, dude, like, I got you. So flash forward now, that year I ended up working with Jason every single week. He was mentoring me, once a week, and basically it was good because, as Jason talks about, it's in those adversities, it's the best way to test what your beliefs are. And so I got to experience what that was like, and being able to learn from him, and ended up going to the College World Series that year. I didn't get an All-American nod, but ended up having an All-American type season. And that flash forward, that next year, had a really good season, and ultimately I got the chance to get drafted and got picked up. And here I am a year and a half later playing professional baseball, just got done, and enjoying every second of it. So Jason, just there's your introduction. There you go.
Yeah, thanks, man. There's so many similarities in your experience with baseball and mine that I could key in on so many of them and talk about it. But the first thing I'd like to say is that I'm incredibly proud of you and everything you've accomplished. You're one of my favorite guys that I've ever had the opportunity to work with, and just really happy for you and where you're at now. And
Thank you.
Yeah, man. And everything to come in the future. So, yeah, similar story in baseball. Years prior, I was born in 1980, so I grew up in the 80s and 90s playing ball. There was no real travel teams available till you were 15, 16 years old. And back then it was a true select team because there were very few to even try out for. And played on those, kind of the best kids in our county, and we had some really good teams. Finished that senior year travel season at 62-10, and it was kind of funny. A lot of us would come up through the ranks together throughout the years, and then we went to these sort of premier teams and ended up all coming back together, and we tried out for the local American Legion team, post 17, and we had incredible. I think our first 6 or 7 guys on the mound. We had a legitimate like 7-man rotation. I think everyone was one or getting drafted, and it was an incredible summer. And then went on to play in college. From college, without getting into all of the details of it, same stuff. Coaches in and out, fired, injuries. I was about the same way. I was 82, 84 off the mound in high school. I was a good pitcher, but I wasn't dominating by any means. I really enjoyed playing other positions probably a little bit better. Was recruited as a utility guy. Coach trying to run it like a professional organization, saw me throw it in the pitch only, bats taken out of my hands. Never got to show my speed or what I could do at the plate. So my identity as a ball player started to kind of be peeled back. Some really, really difficult things in college, and end up transferring. Got right where I was on the cusp of not even being able to play anymore. I was in the Coastal Plains League, wearing it out, and then got injured again and had some unethical behavior, I would say, by a coach that I found out later, and who was our coach there, but was able to make it through there. Got to Middle Tennessee State, went there. Had a fantastic junior year. We won our conference in the Sun Belt, got a top 25 ranking. Big deal for us. It was mid-major, and I developed into a closing pitcher, changed my arm angle, figured out mechanics. Back then, there wasn't as much information, no YouTube, so you really relied on coaches, Baseball America, whatever you could pick up on TV, and started throwing the ball a lot harder. Got into the upper 80s and would clip 90 and a little bit above every now and then with a low action or low angle and good action on the ball, and just lived off of that. And then, man, I came out one day and it was like I had forgotten how to throw a baseball. Strike thrower, went to walk the bases loaded in an inner squad. And that's where there was no name for the yips or anything back then. So, or not one that I had heard of.
Right.
So that day I knew something was different. Like something was off, man. I was like, this is not normal. And it, like you said, it wasn't mechanical necessarily. So with the yips, anytime we throw it accurately, there is a mechanical interruption. But it's not because I'm unaware of it. It's because I can't stop it from occurring. I don't know what's happening and I can't stop it. And it's not from ignorance where, okay, I need to stride deeper, I need to separate longer, or whatever it might be. It's we're very well aware that the ball's not coming out of our hand clean. We just don't know why it's happening. And one of the things that you keyed in on there was, I didn't feel anxiety playing. I didn't have anxiety playing catch, is what you said. I didn't either. I went into the game. And that's when I finally swallowed my own ego and went and talked to a psychologist. And they told me, well, you've got performance anxiety. And so that doesn't make any sense. I don't feel anxious. And I didn't. Eventually, it developed into where I couldn't play catch either. And from there, 9/11 had just occurred. So I joined the Navy, became a Navy SEAL. There's a very similar thing that takes place in shooting where you flinch. And that's where kind of the epiphany happened. And I thought, man, this is very similar when you're shooting a pistol and you flinch. And I thought, man, this is almost exactly what was happening when I was trying to throw a baseball. So I was in special operations for about a decade and then got out. And it still bothered me that I still felt uncomfortable throwing a baseball all those years later. But I knew it wasn't a mental toughness issue because I graduated buds with 20 out of 135 guys. And that requires an extreme amount of mental toughness. And at the same point in life, not two different points in life, but the exact same period in life, I had proved that I was extremely mentally tough with the ability to get through Hell Week, yet also had the yips with a baseball in my hand. So if I was extremely mentally tough and proved that undoubtedly, yet still couldn't throw a baseball due to the yips, then the yips cannot be due to a lack of mental toughness. And that's what I tell guys to start off, including yourself and everyone else, is you are injured. It's just on the inside and no one can see it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have any embarrassment if you had a cast on your arm and you're trying to swing a bat or throw a ball clean, because it's very obvious and observable. And we've overstressed certain parts of the brain. and it starts functioning in a manner that is not conducive to producing the performance that we are attempting to achieve. And there's a lot of relation in the cause and effect that you described, from expectations to identity, being dependent on the game itself for our sense of
Right.
worth, to the threats. You see, we all face certain adversities, bad calls, bad weather, but then there's the anomalies that are thrown in. I had some really difficult challenges off the field that I was going through at that time. Some very difficult challenges on the field and relationship wise with coaches that and in a couple other instances that were not the norm. At the time I just thought, okay, this is college baseball. This is how it is.
Yeah.
And then you look back on it years later or get introduced to other people's experiences and think, okay,
A little different.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Just getting shoved up against a wall isn't
Yeah.
the norm, or having scholarship money threatened, so on and so forth. Now, I don't blame anyone else for what happened to me. It's me placing a deep need of affirmation, validation in sources who were never going to give it to me for whatever reason. And it wasn't all bad. There were good times. There were some miscommunications that were just that, miscommunications that I was also responsible for. I just didn't realize it at the time. It took me years to kind of figure out and unravel how some of all of this came together. But
Right.
any threats that get inserted into that in terms of injury closes your timeline to get drafted.
Yep.
So for me, I'm not going to be a high round pick if I get drafted, which I probably would have that year if I continued along the path. It would be middle to late. So anything that came into that threatened not only my ability to keep playing baseball, but I love playing baseball. I was desperate to keep playing it, was terrified of losing it. So as that window starts losing, because I don't know who I am without it really, and also it's not just like this dependency on the game, but I really loved it. I loved that game.
Yeah.
I just wanted to have it in my life. Not only the intrinsic stuff you get out of it from teammates and at the college level, guys who will push themselves to extreme levels to be the best and be around that, but I just loved it. I loved the smell of my glove. I loved putting oil in my glove, the dirt in my hands, the ball, the smell of the fresh cut grass. I just loved baseball and wanted to keep playing it. And anything that threatened it was like losing something I loved it more than most people.
Yeah. Well, it's always like, kind of like you were saying, like baseball to me is always there if you're having a bad day outside. Yeah. And it's like, that's why you love it more than a lot of things in life, especially at a young age. So I just wanted to cut you off just because you mentioned something in there just about dependency. And I made a video on it actually on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, but you talk about dependency. And one of the things that gave me so much comfort was hearing from a Navy SEAL, like, okay, I know how much what you're going through sucks, but it's like, hold on, like there's something better for you that's coming. Mm-hmm. And if you can get through this, you can get through anything. And you touched on it a little bit, but your dependency, when was the first time, I don't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to, when was the first time that your dependency went to something other than baseball?
Yeah. And yeah, no problem cutting me off. As you know, I can get, once my mind gets on a track, and there's so much, it's hard. This is not a simple thing to discuss, right? This is
not at all.
The 3 steps to proper pitching mechanics. This is a deep thing. So when I reached rock bottom, I had thrown a record number of wild pitches in an inning in the NCAA. It was 6. The record was 7 for a game. I threw 6 in an inning. I knew I wasn't going in a game again, but I didn't quit. I kept showing up and trying, because whatever this was, I felt like, well, if I stop going to the field and I quit trying, I'm going to look back on my life and I'll never know the answer to the question of, will it come back? Because it felt like it came upon me, whatever it is, and would it leave as soon as it had come upon me? I didn't know. So I knew I couldn't live with that. So it was embarrassing, painful, frustrating, difficult, confusing as it was. I kept going and threw the ball all around the field like a circus. And I had a real dark moment once. Team's traveling without me, and I had gone to the field. And I thought, dude, fighters fight. You're a fighter. I fought bullies when I was a kid. I worked for everything. Nothing was handed to me in playing time or anything like that. So it wasn't like I was this golden boy who didn't have to work for much and the naturally talented arm and then just couldn't handle the pressure.
Right.
This wasn't supposed to happen to me, man. I came early, stayed late, was a good teammate, believed in us. I was like, we're going to go to Omaha. We're going to do it. And against all the odds. And so I go to the field, like, you're going to throw until you can again. And I grabbed a couple of bucket of balls and a good friend named Tim, and we threw for 6 hours. And the only reason I stopped was because I couldn't move my arm anymore. I couldn't get it above my elbow above my head. It was hurt because of the massive amount of balls I threw. And I was more inaccurate towards the end. I got worse and worse and worse as I went instead of better and better and better.
No feeling.
And that's when I broke, Jack, because I didn't know how to fight it. I couldn't outthrow it, couldn't punch it. I couldn't outwork it in the weight room. And I felt defeated in my spirit, and I never felt that way. So I started to drink a lot, drift through life, and I woke up one day face down. Couldn't remember the last week. I peeled my face up off the floor, and I thought, okay, man, this thing happened to you. It is what it is. It's going to define who and what you're going to be for the rest of your life. And I knew I needed to make a change, but I didn't know what to change. And I was in so much pain and turmoil on the inside. I just didn't know where else to turn. So if I just started, dude, I just looked to God, and I pushed the bottle of whiskey away. And I remember just kind of looking up and just trying to feel God's presence, like help me. And I had prayed before, but I don't know if I'd ever really prayed prior to this moment. And I leaned into my pain instead of trying to suppress it and stuff it way down deep, because I'm really good at ignoring and overriding things. And there's a time and place for that. But I leaned into it. And I remember I just said, like, one word. I think I said, God, like, why? Why did this happen? Because if I could wrap my head around the purpose of it, then I could move forward. And when I said that, I felt these words come across my heart. Just wait, something better's coming for you. Remember, I still haven't heard of the word yips yet or anything like
Yep.
that. I don't know what's going on. Nobody knows what's going on. I feel like I'm letting my team down. I am letting my team down. And uh, when that happened, I felt peace. And I believe it's the peace that passes understanding, because I didn't deserve it. I had done nothing to create it. My life was hell on earth, and it was hell on earth because my decisions were bad, and my decisions were bad because self-loathing and helplessness was driving them. But I had that peace. Now, I still couldn't throw, but I had faith that there was purpose to what I was experiencing, because prior to that, I thought I had lost my purpose. But when I stopped viewing the circumstances having taken it, and I started viewing it as having purpose for me to be forged into a more capable person who could achieve something greater or more,
Right.
is everything changed. And I learned how to suffer. And I learned later this phrase from Jordan Peterson: if you suffer well to grow in character, or growth in character makes us more capable, and more capable people can achieve more. And I think that experience and finding God in it allowed me to become a man who was capable of navigating an extremely high attrition rate in Buds and Hell Week. But yeah, those difficult times are tough, but we're all going to be there. And I think difficult times is where we leave our legacy, and how we respond to them, or what people are going to remember about us. And then we can take the lessons learned along the way and turn around and help other people. And that's what provides fulfillment. And I
Yeah.
think fulfillment is what winning really is, because if you get to the big leagues, can you stay there? If you can stay there, can you make the All-Star team? Can you be a Hall of Famer?
Yep.
Can you get another dollar? Can you climb the rank of the corporate ladder? There's always another level to get to in status and what we do. But if you can take the things you've learned through difficult times and then help other people succeed through them, that's what provides fulfillment in our lives. And that's truly what I think people are looking for.
And that was evident, when we worked together. I felt that, as when you were were teaching me that, and we were working on that weekly, and that's what I felt. It felt organic. It felt genuine. And I think that there's, especially in today, there's not always that's not always the case. There's a lot of things that people can say that they have done XYZ and they can help you, but it's like you don't really. And I think that was a thing when I was experiencing it at the worst I'd ever experienced it. And when I was going through the yips, and before I made any real progress, it's like everybody I tried to get help from, they couldn't really help because they didn't understand, and they didn't really have they didn't go through it. They didn't know how bad this thing was hurting. And I think that, that's what I've learned from anything from God in this entire experience is just the humility that it has given me to just not be so rushed to judge people when they are experiencing something, to have the grace to be able to help people that need it more than I do, and just to be a better teammate and to play for the greater good of the team and kind of take the game out of myself and make it about the team. And those are just a few. But so when you talk about your faith, because that's something that I grew in, I can't even tell you how much over the course of my collegiate experience. And now, was it something that right after that, like, would it just like bang, all right, God's on my side? Or was it gradually like, because faith for me is, I continue to wake up and I get up and I just continue to do the absolute best I can to glorify him in everything that I do. And was it that instant for you, or was it more gradual, especially as you headed towards the SEAL teams?
Yeah, it had nothing to do really with self-righteousness or moral superiority or legalism or anything like that. I mean, as you know, I'm very rough around the edges. I've been very violent with the proper motivations and proper purpose behind it. But the uh, the faith for me had always been there, but it really grew through that. And I think that we don't always know where we're going. We know where we want to go. I wanted to go to the big leagues, but if we do the right things always work out. And I think that next step is always
Mm,
pretty. And you take the right step down the path. You don't know where that path's going, but it's going to lead to where you need to go. And becoming a SEAL was redemption enough for my failure in baseball. I call it a failure because failure is short of my potential, right? Because I don't want to
right.
sound, played D1 ball and generally, other than that 1 year, had a
Yeah.
good,
Right.
good
Right.
uh, but could have succeeded beyond that. And when I got to the World Series, and Tyler being the first guy I ever worked with professionally through the Yips, and he came in and I forget well, he struck guys out, did really well, and I was just there hugging my wife, crying, and I looked at her and I thought, at the time I thought the Yips was the worst thing that ever happened to me. But now I think it's the best thing that ever happened to me because having lived the life that I've lived, the experiences, the teams, the relationships that were developed, and I got to play ball.
Yeah.
A lot of experiences on the ball field. Would they have been that much different in higher levels and what it maybe I wouldn't trade it for anything is the purpose, is the point. And so I think it's the best thing that's happened to me because watching him, I'd rather be here watching him pitch in the game than pitch in the game myself. And I mean that. If I could rewind time right now, are there things I would do differently having the knowledge that I have now? Yeah, of course. And
Of
that's why I
course.
help mentor other people. But I needed something that was going to yank my outlet away from me because baseball was my outlet. I was a really shy kid growing up, and baseball was my outlet for social acceptance and for status, and I loved it. And I could handle adversity well in life as long as I had the baseball field, and I could handle adversity well in baseball as long as I had the next game to play. But when adversity took baseball is when it hit me where I was vulnerable,
Right.
really broke. And I had the only way to get through it, Jack, was to look outside of myself
Yeah.
because and that was the only problem I could think of that could be inserted into my life where it was like, okay, I don't help. What do I do?
Yeah.
And I looked internal too to, as you know, there's external stimulus things that happen to help create this situation. But how did I help contribute to it as well? What parts of me? And I realized that, hey, man, you have a dependency on this game. And that's different. Like, I love the game. I always will. I love being a Navy SEAL, but the difference is as a baseball player, my identity was dependent on the profession, where in the SEAL teams, I learned what I do doesn't define who I am. Who I am should define what I do. And having
Yeah.
that grounded foundationally, internally, and knowing who I am, where my faith is placed, what my mission is, what my purpose is behind it, with conviction that there's purpose to every outcome. All I can do is go as hard as I can.
Yep.
But whatever outcome I get, I've got to believe there's purpose to it. Learn, be forged, and move to the next thing with faith that path that I'm walking down is going to get to a place better than I probably could have chose for myself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's evident. So you take after this, you take enough steps in the right direction to realize that, once 9/11 happens, like you mentioned earlier, you've been a protector and you want to stand up for, things that are unjust and things that are wrong. And I know that you were angry and like millions of people were, but you wanted to do something about it. So elaborate now. So your college baseball experience happens. You have been through hell and back in the last year or so, year and a half, and 9/11 happened. So kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, I know I'm getting older now. I'm 44, so I forget that a lot of people I'm speaking to sometimes don't have those same experiences as an adult with September 11th, 2000.
I'm one of them.
I was 21 years old. I was in my dorm room in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Big box television sitting on our dresser, Rage Against the Machine poster up, all late 1990s out, early 2000s. we I remember my roommate calling me and he's like, "Hey man, come check this out." I was we had these quad style bathrooms. I was in there. I come into the room and the World Trade Centers have been hit. Be honest with you, I didn't even know what the World Trade Centers were. I knew baseball and went to college to play baseball.
Yep.
But world issues and whatever, I had no idea. So I was like, okay, what's going on here? And I'm watching it unfold, and that's when I saw the second plane hit live on television on the channel that we were watching. And I remember thinking, wow, that wasn't an accident, because people who are, their 20s now grew up with this stuff. But back then there was very limited armed conflict for the United States. And my grandfather, growing up, he was in World War II in Korea. And there was always a part of me like, my generation's not going to have a war. And that happened. And I remember thinking, okay, this was on purpose. This was intentional. And my initial response was a bit of disappointment, because I didn't think we would be able to ever figure out who had done it.
Right.
Afghanistan, Taliban, ISIS, Al Qaeda, those kind of words, groups, entities were not everyday language or known entities like they are now. That happened. Then that was the fall of my senior season. So baseball was still going well at that point. Really well. In fact, that was when there was kind of this 6-month window where I really got good, where I went from an above average college pitcher to dominating at that level. Probably the best game I ever threw was up in the Northwoods League and Summer League. I threw 3 innings once without anyone making contact, not even a foul ball. And that's when, just 9 Ks. I was like, okay, I might actually this thing, I was like, okay, if I could start stacking those. I was real inconsistent, but if I could start lining those up. And then that spring is when it all fell apart. So I had a choice to make, man. And part of me was, why put yourself through hell? Literally,
Once you've just gotten out of it.
Out of this personal hell,
Yeah.
But without being able to articulate it at the time, I knew that I needed challenge in my life. I love being a part of a team. I love being around guys who push themselves beyond the status quo. And there's some guys who do all the right things, work really hard, and just don't make it for whatever reason. It just doesn't work out. And the chips don't fall in their place. But the reality is for most guys that play at that kind of level, man, and beyond, and where you're at, is they put in the work and work up on a level that most will never understand. And I like being around guys like that. And there were so many things that drove me to the teams, man. I felt like as a kid, there was a lot of projection from tough guys in the gym or football coaches. But it's like, man, if you really press on them, are they really that tough? I don't think so. And a lot of the guys at the church, I thought, were legalistic, self-righteous. You find out who really loves their neighbor at themselves when there's danger knocking at the door in Afghanistan, somewhere else, not, through. I get in trouble for chewing tobacco, or I got in a little fight one time sticking up for a kid at a church camp, and I thought, it's your sons, all these church little guys or whatever that were the ones doing it, and you're not going to take up for this kid, so somebody has to. So that stuff bothered me. And one thing that I really liked about Buds was there was nobody's dad contributing to the booster club. There was nothing. It was just Hell Week, as hard as it was a fair deal. The standard was the standard. You either make it or you don't. And that's all I had been looking for. And it was a chance for me to prove to myself that I was who I believed myself to be and go be a part of writing history. This was all new. We didn't know it was going to go 20 years. I remember thinking, man, if I don't go now, because my dad wanted me to finish college. And I did. It took me 8 months. I almost left 8 months prior to graduating because I thought I was going to miss out on the wars. And, we had no idea how all of that would unfold. But yeah, at the time I thought I can either go get a job doing all the same things all my buddies are doing, and I would be comfortable. But where am I really going to be 5 years down the road on the inside? Am I going to feel fulfilled? Am I going to be, we need challenge in our life. We're hardwired for challenge.
You're right.
the pursuit of an aim that is worthy and take that risk. I mean, otherwise you're going to grow old and look back and think, okay, great. Might have been comfortable. I got money in the bank and whatever, but who am I? What have I done? Yeah. And
Yeah.
putting yourself out there and being vulnerable, whether it's war or whether it's starting a business or doing something with music or art or whatever it is, and that's in alignment with your intrinsic passion. When you put yourself out there in calculated risk, not reckless, but take some risk, and you're vulnerable, that's when you really find God, man.
Yeah.
Safety
Yeah.
and
Well, that's faith. That's faith. It's you can't grow in faith and comfort. Like that doesn't, those two things just don't coincide. So, um, so you finally you're on that path. And just a question that I have to ask you. So outside of your faith in God, just because I know who my people I look to, and the people who I looked up to, that I believe that have helped me through times of difficulty and struggle. And a lot of people could say you for that guy for them, especially when they needed you, and in times that they needed you. Um, when you were in Hell Week, when you were going through Buds, who was someone that you looked to or you looked up to, or if anyone, or if it was just yourself or your experiences?
mom, dad, couple of good buddies, and when there were a lot of people who didn't think I could make it or shouldn't go. You don't make it through Buds, you're gonna be in the fleet, and you've got a college degree, and it's a big risk to take. But there were a few people who did, and I thought, hey, this makes complete sense. Those who really knew me, and that was one thing I advised athletes on, advised Tyler on, advised you on, is that ring, right? Your tier one ring. Those are people who go in there. Those are people who I allow to have effect on how I feel about myself and the decisions that I make. And those are people who love me for who I am, not what I do. And tier two is friends, acquaintances. Tier three is everyone else. It should have a minimal, if hardly any effect on me whatsoever. And that's what I come back to. My dad, I was real nervous before I went into Hell Week. He passed away about this time last year. I like to tell stories about keep this spirit still influencing others. And I remember this letter that he wrote me, and he said, if you weren't a little bit nervous about entering the most difficult military training in the world, then something would be wrong with you. He said, just enter that training the man you are, and the rest will be history. And I just felt so settled when he said that, and all the experiences him and I had had throughout the years. And but I knew my mom really believed in me, and I knew I was going to have to call her at some point. And I wrote that in the bill of my hat, and I never looked at it. I think I have that hat. I don't know. Maybe I don't have it right here next to me, but phone call. So I'm going to have to make that call. It's going to be one way or the other. And that was exactly what I wanted. As soon as Hell Week was over, I made one call, and I called my mom and said, "Mom, I made it." And that was it. I was the only person I called.
So in those moments, and I know, and you've told me the story, and I still actually I think about it when things, just because there were, especially in professional baseball, it's college baseball is, I thought just because I played in the SEC, it was like, oh, pro ball breeze, like I would be in Double A easy. And I got to professional baseball this year, and I got there. When I first got there, I got drafted, and I hit above 300, and everything was smooth sailing and was ready to go. And then I get to spring training this year, and I was terrible, and I wasn't hitting at all. And they drafted me to be a hitter, and they're like, dude, if you're not banging, you're not going to play. And I actually went the first 2 months of the year, and I was barely playing. I was playing like once a week, and I actually got put on the development list, and which is not the place you want to be. I was hitting like a $140, and I actually looked back and at some of our stuff, and I just remember the idea of never quit. And it was in that moment I was like, dude, I really have. I have a degree from Texas A&M on the back burner. I could get any job pretty much that I want, and I could. It could be really easy to just be like, yeah, well, like, had a great career, and it just kind of looks like this just isn't going to go my way. And I thought back to all the things that we talked about, and that's the one that resonated with me the most. And it was in those moments, and I'll let you speak on your moment because, I think it's incredibly powerful, but it was like, I remember I'd just gotten back off the bus. I sit down and it's pouring rain, and I'm sitting in the dugout. I'm by myself and nobody can see me, or, nobody knows what I'm doing. And I'm just sitting there praying, and it's pouring rain. The only thing that's helping me is the dugout. And I'm just like, same thing, very similar, but it was just another moment to just sit in my faith. And, fast forward, I ended up playing every day past, mid June, and ended up turning in a pretty dang good year. And it was just that moment. I never thought about it again after that moment in the last, 5 months, but we all have those moments that are just, we're weak. And it's like that little moment where the devil is just kind of creeping in, and you just hear him like, dude, like, you can go back to Texas, you can finish your degree, you can work on making some money. Like, it's going to be okay. Like, and it's like, no, like, it's not what I want to do. So talk to us about your experience in those weak moments, especially in Hell Week, and how that tier one circle, the phone call, just played a part in it.
Well, I think when it comes down to any weak moment or decision point, we want to look back and ask this question: will I be proud of who I was and what I did in this moment? And understand the moment will pass, nothing lasts forever. And what pushes us through those weak moments is the power of the purpose behind what we're doing. And that's why I always advise people to do something that's meaningful to them. Meaningful purpose is what fuels our desire and feeds our discipline and ability to accomplish things. And that's why, with so much superficiality in the world today, if we can lock into things that are meaningful, that's really what's going to drive us through those difficult moments. And as you know, I'm a coach. I'm a performance coach, so I get into coaching mode when I'm on these podcasts sometimes and get too long-winded. So I'll try to keep it
No, you're good, man.
validated.
I love it.
There's a couple of things to kind of key in on that you mentioned, and when things start to go wrong, that fear can creep in. And one time when I was overseas, my daughter had been born, and before her being born, it's okay, if I get mine out here, I get it. Like, I'm living the dream. This is an awesome job. I'm getting these incredible experiences. But then when my girl was born, I started getting a little bit afraid, and I went, same thing, just went back to God, and again stopped trying to tell him everything and just started to shut up and listen. And this, I'm afraid, and I need to be able to handle this. I'm getting into a sort of passive nature instead of a proactive nature, and you can't play to win and try to not fail at the same time. And
Right.
kind of how I was getting to is, I can't fight to win and try to not die at the same time. I got to choose one. And I started thinking about, I prayed, and then these words came across my heart. And when this happens to me, it's not audible, it's not visual, it's not an angel in front of me, it's just on me. And it was, are you where you're supposed to be, doing what you're supposed to do? And I thought the answer to that was genuinely yes. So I thought, okay, well, if that's yes, then I can't be afraid of what may happen, and ended up not occurring anyways. I've got to have conviction that there's purpose to it. And it might be an adverse event in my daughter's life that would bring in people better than me, or help her be forged into the person capable of fulfilling God's will and role in her life. And once I came to that conclusion, I was right back on track. So as far as Hell Week goes, there was only one moment where quitting ever entered my mind, because it goes to that, that burn the ships, and there's quitting's not an option. And that's how I felt about it. I just didn't make quitting an option until it was. And we just got pounded the night. It starts on Sunday afternoon. We ran, I think, 15 miles the night before with logs, boats on our heads, and all sorts of different things. There's surf passage in and over those waves, across the rocks, and rock portage, which is dangerous, big slippery boulders. Guys slip and break legs, and you can get hurt. And we get through that. It's dawn. It's not like the sun's up, but it's like there's that crack, it's still dark,
Right.
a little bit of light,
Right.
freezing, man. And we're getting surf tortured over and over and over again, to the point where I thought, okay, this had to have been our last round, like 2 or 3 times prior. I remember looking over at a buddy, like, where is everybody? Because there was such a small amount of guys that I thought they had half of our class off doing something else somewhere else. And he looked at me and said, they're gone. I'm like, what do you mean they're gone? And it hit me. I was like, oh, they quit. They're gone. And I came up and I looked back at him to ask him something else, and he was gone. And I was like, oh my goodness, man. And we came up out, long story short, we came up out of the water on the edge of hypothermia, like shaking and kind of stumbling up onto the beach. And you start to lose your clarity and thought, and you're hypothermic. And one of the instructors came up to me very kindly and calm. He just kind of gets right in my face, kind of smiling. He's like, "Hey, man, you're done, bud. It's time for you to quit." And up in front of me was the bell. They had the bell on the back of a pickup truck. And they also had burritos, carne asada burritos, and the tinfoil wrappers, steaming off of them, a big old jug of coffee and blankets.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a line of students at the bell to quit. And that's when I had a weak moment. This is the first night. We still got to get to Friday. I was frozen, bloody, battered. But so was everyone else. And you start thinking, okay, well, how am I going to get to Friday? It's just Monday morning. Sun's not even all the way up yet. And I managed to stay negative, like I don't want to quit, but I started to consider it. I opened it up to be an option. And when that happened is when he got in my face again. He said, "Yeah, man, look, everybody in the class hates you. It's time for you to quit." And that's when my mind went straight to my mom and my assistant baseball coach, Jim McGuire. Him and I had a great relationship, and a couple of okay, what am I going to tell them if I quit? I got to tell them something. How do I justify this? And that's what we're about. That's what we do when we're about to make a decision that we know we're going to regret. Is we try to find a way to justify it. And if we can just try to connect those dots, then we can take that path that the more comfortable path. And I remember thinking, there's nothing that I can say other than these guys are more badass than I am, and I didn't have what it takes. And to me, that was unacceptable. And the way I broke it down is the bell was the same distance from my boat. I was supposed to go to my boat and the bell, and then they're same distance, different directions. And I thought, okay, man, I can't just lay down here and die on the beach. If I quit, I got to take my body to the bell. Well, if I can take my body that distance in the wrong direction, I can take it the same distance in the right direction. So I'm just going to get to there. I'm not going to think about anything else but just getting to that boat. And if I quit when I get to the boat, then I quit, but just get to the damn boat. I still don't want to go. So I told myself to take one step, and I took one tiny little step, and then another and another and another. I got to the boat. My buddies were there. Our faces weren't smiles and defiance of the instructor, but it was tough, man. It was grit. It was mean. We were bleeding, but we were still there. And we found motivation in each other's expressions. And, I was like, okay, let's get it on, man. When we threw that boat on our head, we started running down the beach and, hey, does everybody hate me? And they're like, no, man, they say that to everybody. You're good. So never entered my mind again, man. But I got through that moment. And you think about it, one single step, 200 miles in Hell Week, they say on average, 300,000 steps, if I did the math correct. I don't remember most of them, but I remember that one because it was pivotal, because it led to all the others behind it. And I just never it may not be a literal step, but just never underestimate the power of winning a moment. One single moment, one hit, one pitch, one decision. Just, you know what? I'm going to go back to the field today. I'm just going to get to the field. Maybe that's it. Whatever it is. And you just never know. Because that just launched my life. It was a crossroads, and man, God will put us in the situation and give you all the opportunity. And it's just like, take it when it's there. If we don't, because we all fail, we all make bad choices. Because in this legalistic nature of the religious side, sometimes I'm just like, okay, well, I've failed God's will for my life, right? I mean, I didn't,
Right.
There's always a way back. There's always a way back to it. He'll bring you back. He'll give you another opportunity. You'll find a way,
No doubt. No doubt. So was there ever, after being in the teams and you go through, the training, so you get through, you make it through Hell Week, you make it through Buds, and we kind of get back to the idea of the yips. So was there ever a moment, and you talked about earlier, you began to kind of to figure some things out about the yips, and this is where just a lot, your story is so unique in the yips regard, because it's like you had to go through things that nobody else has gone through. I don't know. I mean, maybe there was another Jason Kuhn that just never figured out that he failed or went through college baseball, had the yips, went through Navy SEALs, and just never became public that he figured out the yips. But it's like you're the only guy who's experienced the yips and going through Hell Week. And were there moments, and you're starting to learn things, that this thing that you had, you're starting to ask kind of the right questions about, or you're starting to figure out some things that not a lot of people in this area know. And so you kind of get deeper into it, go through the 2000s and the early 2010s.
Yeah.
So were there moments where you kind of figured out, or was there a specific moment where you realized like, hey, like this has nothing to do with what anybody has told me? Like this is something that I know the answer to, or I don't want to say I know the answer to, but you're finally asking the right questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, man, it was really it was a long, slow process over the course of a decade or so, where it was always on the back of my mind, wanted to figure this out, but it wasn't something that I was on a mission to do necessarily until later when I was out of the SEAL teams. But I started figuring out little pieces, like I said, the flinch with the gun, uh,
Right.
and let's give some love to Brian Kane as well. Probably the best sports psychologist in the country, if not the world, and a fantastic man. By being able to, he puts his ego aside and he says, when you call and when other people call us, he says, "Hey, I've tried to solve this with the yips. I don't understand it. I don't know what to do with it. Go to
Yeah.
this guy or go to this," or there's one other he refers people to as well. And I think that's fantastic and that's why he's so good at what he does and why
Yeah.
I think he's a great dude. And because let's contrast that with another one that Tyler had in the big leagues who called his agent and said he should drop him and I should stop working with him because he's had the best mental training, or I don't want an exact quote, but the best that MLB can offer. And we're prolonging his suffering and providing him false hope. 3 years later,
Wow.
he's winning the Atlanta Braves. And the thing with that is we all get caught up in ego. We all get caught up, and then we think we're actually doing what's best for someone, right? But if
Yep.
we stop and you think, okay, here's a guy who's experienced the yips himself, then became a Navy SEAL, experienced combat. Maybe he has something of value to share with this man. Perhaps I should ask him some questions to better myself and knowledge base on this, because that's the first problem with the yips is it's defined incorrectly. Generally speaking, by mainstream sports psychology, they define the problem wrong. Therefore, the solutions that are provided are for the not the correct problem, and so they're ineffective, completely ineffective. As you know, as I know, almost everything I tried didn't work. In fact, some of it made it worse. And
Yep.
so, and then they get frustrated with you like you're not doing it right. And that's kind of the cycle until you hit rock bottom, and right? So, anyways, there were definitely moments. There was one moment in particular where I was at my parents' house, and I don't know if I was still in the SEAL teams or out, but it was late. And having gained the confidence and maturity of being a veteran of the SEAL teams, I wasn't so reliant or dependent or placed so much credibility in all these expert sources, if you will.
Right.
Okay, because one thing you really learn in the SEAL teams with mission planning or any problem is how to reverse engineer it. It's not, can it be done? How are we going to do it? And you just start working it out. So that's what I did. I was in our living room and I was picked up a baseball. There's always a baseball around, from the 2 decades of playing it. And I found one kind of lying there and I was going to throw it into the recliner 10 feet away, nobody in the living room with us, just for the hell of it. And then I remember thinking, like, I was still nervous. I'm a combat veteran, dude. I'm still looking through the window, or into the lamp.
Right.
And so I thought, okay, I'm going to track my arm and stop it where it feels different than normal. And so I did, and I got to here, and I was like, right there. Right there, something's happening, and it's different. What's happening? It's tense. My arm is flexing. Why is it flexing? I don't want it to flex. I'm not telling it to flex, like the shooting. We tell ourselves not to flinch, yet we flinch anyways, and the bullet goes off path through the subconscious expectation of an explosion or threat, right? That's developed over the course of time. So I'm having this tension that is involuntary, and that was the key word, involuntary. And that's the biggest reason they're getting it wrong, is they're treating it as if it's a conscious mental anxiety problem, such as I am nervous, where we get into high pressure performance and we have things for that clutch moments to bring our clarity and baseline back down. And just a rabbit hole real quick, that's not through box breathing and it's not through deep visualization. When we're stacked on a door getting ready to go in, it's not like we can meditate ourselves back down. We've got to work within that. And
Right.
there's things to that. But that's the other thing too, Jack, is sports psychology often will conflate mental health skills and principles with mental performance skills and principles.
Right.
And it doesn't have to contrast one or the other. I meditate, I pray, I reflect, I breathe. But it doesn't necessarily help me shoot a gun better when people are shooting at me. It just helps.
Exactly.
It helps me relieve stress, stuff like that, right? Okay, anyways. Yeah, man, all sorts of things along the way started coming together. But having that maturity and confidence in myself to start asking the right question, I started peeling back the layers one by one to get the problem defined properly, and then start recreating or developing solutions that were effective. Okay, now I know what the problem is. There has to be a way to solve it. And so that's what we did. And it wasn't through teaching people to be more mentally tough. It was through the repetition, centering our spotlight of focus on seam and finger, nothing else. It was actually getting very conscious, where they tell you not to be conscious, right? Think about a throw you made when you were really good and whatever. Like you can maintain that throughout a competitive environment. You can't.
Yeah.
It's absurd. But I can't spot, so we actually do kind of the opposite sometimes in some areas of what they say, and sometimes it's the same.
Right. And also too, I think that it helps to, because you definitely, there's a couple stories that I've kind of heard just from my own personal research just in the last few years where you hear guys, they just they just don't play for 3, 4, 5 years, and then they pick up a baseball again, and it's like, holy cow, like this feels good again. And you touched on it without even really saying it, the 10 years without really, getting into a competitive environment, throwing a baseball. It's like, and also being a combat veteran definitely helps the perspective of realizing that, hey, like it's still important, but it's baseball, right? Like there definitely is that time away. It gives people that added perspective, would you say? And then that added element of like, okay, like, because you always told me, and I always felt like I was like, every time we talked, I was like, man, like he's telling me the stories, and like baseball just doesn't really seem that significant, right? Like I was like, my problems just don't feel like that, not in a bad way, but not like you were doing it on purpose or being condescending, but it was like, dude, like I can beat this. Like I was like, that's what it felt like. It was like, bro, it's throwing a baseball, and I picked up the ball again, and I'll never forget it. You told me, you go, dude, it's your buddy. Like it's not supposed to be something you're afraid of. And I was like, I looked at it, and I was like, he's right. Like that. I don't know. So
No,
I bet that definitely played a part in it as well.
yeah, it's like a bad breakup or an abusive relationship, you and the ball, when you're struggling with the yips. And yeah, you got to stop. It's like, man, no, this is my bud, man. We've been buds since we first met, and we're gonna go dominate again. And that's the goal with everyone I work with, is not to just be able to throw clean again, but to fall in love with throwing again. That's what we used to love to do. And that kind of plays into identity too. And we were talking about, okay, I remember all the bad things that I did. And that's what I was doing in college also, especially when things got dark and I was cycling out, was, okay, I failed at this, I failed at that, I failed at this, I could have done this, but got the bat taken out of me. This, that, and all these frustrations and pressure points. And I stopped and I started thinking about the good things. Like, man, you did stand your ground and fight bullies. You did get a game-winning hit to go to the AAU World Series in the bottom of the last inning, and you threw that no-hitter, and you did this, and you did that, and the other thing. And I thought, dude, that's truth objectively, because it's already happened. So you don't need anybody's affirmation of it. It's already happened. It's true. You are tough. You do have what it takes. You don't need that to be approved by a coach or by anyone else. Just believe in the truth of it, but channel it into service of team and mission. Because I got so focused, so far ahead of the draft, and I forgot about that kid that just loves to play ball. And it's really, there's elements of post-traumatic stress sort of that take place with this as it develops itself and manifests itself. Because basically what we've done is we've overstimulated the predator survival response mechanism. Anytime we feel a threat subconsciously, say if I were to throw a punch at your chest and you saw it coming, but you didn't know I was going to do it, it was just like, whoa, here it comes. You don't have time to get your hands up. Your pectoral muscles are going to tense and become tight to protect your vital organs. But you're not going to consciously say to do that. It just happens. It's instinctual. Right. And that's what happens with the yips as you go to throw, putt, or do anything else that requires fine dexterity in a joint. Then it interrupts the mechanical motion, and that mechanical interruption creates an inaccurate outcome. And then as that inaccurate outcome occurs, there's all the feelings that are associated with it, embarrassment, fear, because the anxiety is a byproduct. We yip the throw, it goes like 10 feet over somebody's head, hits a guy over here in the back, you throw it into your own toes or whatever it is, and you're like, but it felt normal. Like the first time I did it, it felt like it was coming out of my hand clean. In fact, I didn't know until about a month into battling the yips that I just thought it was my release point. I didn't realize that it was like actually coming out sideways and everything else. Yeah. So the anxiety is a byproduct because you don't know what just happened. You don't know why it happened. You don't have a solution for it if it happens again. And then you get tremendously anxious. And then the psychologists have you revisit trauma, breathe, visualize a happy moment, and all this other silly stuff. And then, that makes you feel a little bit better. You get 3 or 4 clean throws off in warm-ups, or maybe that can get you through warm-ups, but then you get out onto the field for PFP or first and thirds or a live game, and it's like, womp, womp, womp. It won't last because we never got to the foundational issue, which is that tension that is occurring through that predatory survival instinct that's kicking off, right? It's a threat. Consciously, it's not a threat. You're like, okay, this is a baseball game. It's not a real threat, but there is a lot attached to it because we love that game, because we want to keep playing it. Money involved, a lot of money, as you start moving up to the ranks, all sorts of different things, right?
Right. So just on some more reflective things, just because we talked about it a little bit earlier, just about it becomes the fulfillment piece of it and what you have learned and how you can teach others. Specifically, I don't think I've ever asked you this question. I guess it's more to you just because you coach your son's team. But say you have a kid on the team that's not your son that has the yips, or I look back and I actually realize I played with a lot of kids growing up that had it, and it really can apply to any age. But say there's a 9-year-old, right, on your son's team, and, you kind of have figured out like there's something going on there, and it's kind of a reoccurring theme, a reoccurring issue, or I guess maybe when he's a little older, or whoever the case is, or a golfer or whatever. What would you say to the support system or the people around that person's tier one, or like the friends, the family, the coaches that are seeing that? And what would you say to those people in terms of how to help that individual?
Yeah. The youngest I've seen it is 13. I think it takes a few years to kind of develop. We got to have some experience out there to develop the conditions. But we're seeing it younger and younger ages, specializations in sport, not just a single sport, but a specific. I mean, we're having pitchers only at like 13 and 14 years old. Utterly absurd, And, these guys yelling and screaming. I've seen kids getting yelled and screamed at for honest errors made, mistakes made, and probably the hardest game there is to play. 7, 8 years old, 6 years old. Grown men. It's like if we were at the grocery store right now, somebody would intervene, but because it's on a baseball field and you're laying into this kid because he missed a ball, it's just, yeah. Anyways, okay. What I would say to, say, a player or a support network that's going through that is understand that they are battling an injury where a certain part of the brain has been overstimulated, just as if we had pulled our hamstring. And the problem is the solutions are typically would be the same as, you go into the sports psychologist, or you just like, well, just throw it hard, or hey, relax. And it's so frustrating because you're like, I don't feel nervous. I don't feel unrelaxed. I feel, and you feel like a predator in your mind. When you're at a mound, you're hunting batters, and, you still have that mentality in your mind, or the ball's coming straight into your feet, and then everybody thinks you're mentally weak. And it's the most frustrating thing I've ever experienced. So what would it be like going out and trying to, it's like ice and take, visualize, relax, and throw you right back into the game, and it's like pulling that hamstring and going out the next day and trying to sprint 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
You need some time, rehabilitation process, just like you would with any other injury, because it's not a thinking problem. If it were a thinking problem, we would just tell the player to think differently and it would be solved just like that, but it's not. Okay. And so that would be patient, give them time, give them some space. And then typically what we have to do is remove them from the environment that they're in right now. Because that was one of the mistakes I made, is I kept going out on the foul line, close next to each other, and trying to throw in the same conditions. And we got to reverse engineer to where we can find a baseline where we can achieve success, and then reintroduce the
stressors or things
and that's what's so weird about it, is it can be the simple, those senseless things that indicate it. And sometimes and when you're honest with yourself, it's like, okay, there's this construction worker over there and it's kicking in right now. And rationally, like, this is
Yeah.
absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
You can't stop what's happening to the nervous system and how it's responding. Just like adrenaline, like when you're in combat, somebody shoots at you, it's not like, okay, adrenaline, kick in or don't kick in, or like you can stop it when it does. It just does, from the way it associates with things and the way it's perceiving things. Okay. And then the other thing I would say is get real single-minded focused on nothing but feeling the seam come off of the finger with all the freedom to fail. Actually, that's how I would have answered that question is man, give them freedom to fail. And just like, let's give Coach Schloss here too, because Coach Schloss, I forget his exact words to you, but basically he's like, Jack, you're going to play. And I don't care if you throw the ball all around the field, but you're going to play until you figure it out. And you've got all the world. That's like,
that
all time, right?
yeah, that was pretty much it. And my case is just a little different because it was so odd because I was really, when I got to A&M, I struggled a little bit out the gate in the fall in terms of hitting, and then I started mashing and I was raking, and I get to the winter and I come back, and the first two games I remember, that was when I was kind of, I was struggling hitting, and then that was when the throwing was bad, and that's when I of course called you. But I actually really, my entire time at Texas A&M, I raked. Like, I hit really, really well, and I did. And what's so crazy about it, Jason, is I was really good at 99% of the game, but the only thing I could possibly think about was that ball that I threw into left field during PFPs, and I was just like, man, like, this thing is kicking my butt. Or like, whether it was in catch play when it was really bad, and before I really had gotten start to ask the right questions. And I talked to Schloss about it, and when I became open about it, that was probably the most freeing thing, is when I stopped trying to hide it.
Yes, that's the word I was looking for, Jack.
Yeah. And I was like, I felt everything that I stopped trying to hide it. I went to Schloss, and he was like, I told him I was working with you because he knew you from past experiences or previously working with you. And he was like, okay, like, sounds good. Like, just keep throwing it. I was like, all right. I walked out, and it was like, I thought like it was just going to be this big thing. And I walked out, and it was like easy. And then, and I started to tell my teammates, and they were like, awesome, dude. Like, how can I help? And I was like, whoa, like, I was expecting like, oh, bro, you got the yips, like, what are you gonna do? Yeah, like, the Y word, or like like they call it the thing. But everybody I talked to, they were like literally all my teammates, and this is where I give credit, because I was super blessed to have an unbelievable support network when I was at A&M, and even pro ball too, frankly. But and really, honestly, my entire time, it was just in my head, so I didn't want to tell anybody about it.
Yeah.
But once I stopped trying to hide it, I gave myself the freedom to fail. It was a slow process, when I was first getting through it, but it's to the point nowadays, it's like, I'm just grateful every time I go out and play catch, and I just feel the freedom of the ball coming out of my hands, because it's like, that was taken away from me, and I know how hard that was to get through that. And anytime I make a throw in game, it's like, that's that extra, like, let's go, like, heck yeah, that's the thing. But yeah, that's kind of where I would say that was with me.
Yeah. Not having to hide it, man. Because when we feel like we have to hide something, we give it more power. It just grows.
Yep.
And it's just nothing to hide. It has a taboo stigma to it, and it's because people are afraid of it, and they're afraid of it because they don't understand it. People are what they don't understand, and everybody knows that. Even though sports psychology says, "Oh yeah," well, everybody knows there's never been a consistent solution for it until now, and so it's like terrified of getting it or whatever else. And I just think those are some of the behind the scene things too, with coaches, especially high profile ones like him. That they only see what they see, what media reports. They don't see those kind of things where he could have been like, "Okay, Jack, I'm not dealing with this. You're gone. I'm just going to cycle in somebody else," especially with the way sports work.
That's very true.
So whatever. Yeah, man, getting that. And that's one of the things I really want to break down with this thing is the stigma, because it's so much more common, especially in golf, dude. It is everywhere. It's almost even more taboo. You're like really not allowed to talk about it. Meanwhile, like half of the dudes out there are yipping it all over the field, and we got to. But how are we going to defeat something if we can't talk open and honestly about it? Or say, "Oh, it's not a real thing," or "Yeah, it's all in your head." Okay, maybe it's in my head, but it's still manifesting itself in an inability to throw strikes or hit a first baseman or whatever it is. And so, who cares where it is? Like, let's beat this thing, man, or figure out a solution to it. And yeah, because I felt that pain and frustration, and my life went in a different direction. Um, I did. I had a really unique situation in two areas of my life, from the SEAL teams to baseball, that I think converged to create a roadmap or an opportunity to develop a roadmap of how to beat this. And
Right.
it's not like we sit down here and we're like, okay, Jack, you've got to be stronger mentally, and here's how you're more confident. Like, you're already a confident
Right.
dude. You wouldn't have been at Texas A&M and all the places you've been if you weren't a confident dude. This isn't a confidence issue. We have a throwing progression, and we do
Yeah.
talk about confidence and mental toughness and stuff, because going out there and applying these things is difficult. And anytime we can have deeper understandings of the intangibles, the better off we'll be. But that's how it works. There's a whole system to it that involves throwing and retraining the subconscious mind to trust free dexterity. Because every time we make
Yep.
that throw, it's a negative feedback loop. And what does the mind do when it experiences that? It's like, oh, bad outcome, protect yourself more.
Yep.
And the instinctual protective mechanism is more tension. You get even tighter,
Yep.
tighter, and tighter, and it's having the opposite of the intended effect, which is to protect yourself from the danger it's perceiving.
No doubt. Yeah. Yeah. That and that was the other thing too. And I'll just kind of make a short rabbit hole or a quick detour. Is the idea of, like, when they would tell me to just visualize, I was like, bro, I can only visualize throwing it like 10 feet to the left of the target, and I was like, I would literally feel my body go like, they're like,
Yep.
that little twitch thing. I was like, dude, this is not helping at all. I
Yep.
was like, I gotta, like, the only way I could go do this is when we started working together, and I was like, I would literally get in the cage, and it became like, all right, like, I'm gonna throw it to the back net, and I'm gonna just literally try to just feel the good feeling come out of my hand, and we're just gonna do that as many times, or we're gonna do that today, and then we're gonna come up with a system for it and things that work for me in terms of what I say to myself, and that's gonna be that. But when I stopped visualizing, I actually got way better, which is the funny part. But yeah.
I'm laughing not at you. I'm laughing with you, because
Oh yeah.
I can still see the visualization that I would try to see way back then when I closed my eyes, like visualize. And I'm standing on the mound at Reese Smith Field in Murfreesboro, and my ball makes it about 35 feet down into the left end of the dirt. And that's all I could see. And when I try to not have that one, it goes about 15 feet over his head up into the back.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it goes back into the bullpen, where I threw one out of the bullpen and onto the game field. And an enclosed bullpen, not the open ones that face the field. One that does not face the field. It's not the other way, but it's like straight up and down, fenced in, and I still reached
the
field in between the lines with So
oh yeah.
Yeah, that's
Oh yeah.
And it only makes it worse, because now you're just reinforcing this thing over and over and over again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I got one more question for you, and this is kind of a true kind of, I would say, full circle $1 million question, but it's a little different than the $1 million question. If you knew now what you know then, what would you have said? I wrote this, and I just kind of thought, because I've thought about it a lot when on that day, or when I called you, and that day, just kind of in baseball on my drive home, and I remember being in tears. I was just like, this is insane. Like, why is this happening? So imagine you were, with 21, 22-year-old Jason Kuhn on the day that you threw 6 wild pitches, and you're in the stands and you're watching that game. And my first question would be, what would your reaction be watching that unfold? And then the second thing is you get 5 minutes after that game to speak with him. What would you say?
Oh man, that's a hell of a question. Well, watching it unfold, what I would feel is just heartfelt empathy, probably with a smile on my face, not for what the kid is going through,
Right.
but for, like, just, I've been there, bud, and you're going to be okay. And that understanding that pain and frustration, just really genuinely. And, the thought that come to my mind would be putting an arm around your shoulder and being like, hey, it's all right. And this isn't your fault necessarily. Are there things we could do differently to have it had not occurred in the first place? Yes, but it's not like we did anything wrong. We did the best that we knew how to do, especially for high achievers and competitors. It's like we're doing everything we know how to do. Like I said, showed up early, stayed late, did the right things for the most part. Did I make some mistakes here and there? Yeah, of course. But for the most part, I was a good dude. Worked hard, wanted to make it to the big leagues for all the right reasons. Overcame so much adversity over and over and over and over again. Finally have yourself in the path where the draft is right there. And it means so much for so many reasons. And it's just right there. You're about to step across that line into it. And for me, Jack, and the level of player I was, just getting drafted would have been enough. Like that would have been, I
Yeah.
didn't. I believed I'd get to the big leagues. I was going to set records. But if I could play pro ball, I feel fulfilled with that. Can move on in life, and it's like, boom. And I would have rather broken my leg, just not been good enough, or whatever, than to have this problem. And but I think the two biggest things that stuck out to me that were introduced to me later was what I do does not define who I am. Who I am defines what I do. And being really grounded in that identity and ego, not egotistical, but allowing my sense of self-worth to be foundationally grounded in healthy things. Like if you don't believe in yourself, then why should anybody else? And just somebody told me later in sniper school, just embrace your God-given best and give it to the team. I was struggling as a new guy because I was trying to. He said, he came up to me and said, the reason when you shoot by yourself, you're great. When you get around the other guys, you suck, and it's because of the company that you're in. And we need snipers, but we're not going to be able to make use of your capability because you're more concerned with gaining the acceptance of your peers than embracing your God-given best and giving it to the team. So that's probably what I would say is that what I do doesn't define who I am. Who I am defines what I do. Just embrace your God-given best and give it to the team with conviction that there's purpose to every outcome you receive. And no matter what you can control in terms of playing time or what you can affect in your career or whatever, is just keep working, man. Just keep working and trust that there's a plan to this. It may seem chaotic in the moment, but there's a path forward.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. It's all very powerful. I'm sure to anybody who's listening, and I know it was for me and still is to this day. And for the rest of my life, there'll always be things that I learned from you and took away that will always serve me for the greater good in the decisions I make. So as always, I thank you for that, and thank you for coming on, Jason. And as always, I got to say thank you for your service.
Yep, I passed that on to my wife, as you well know, man. She had the hard job, buddy. Seeing you guys succeed, not only on the field, but also in how you all develop and as men, and it's just brings me so much joy, gives me purpose, it motivates and inspires me to keep going. And I'm just so happy for you. You did it, and I'm proud of you, and look forward to the future.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jason.
Thank you for tuning into Approach Pod, where we push boundaries, challenge limitations, and unlock the potential within. Remember, growth isn't a destination, it's a journey. You have the power to overcome, to evolve, and to thrive. If today's episode sparked something in you, don't stop here. Take action, share your thoughts with us, and connect with our community. If you haven't already, subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Until next time, keep it less about the results